World Spaceflight News Special Report.
Preparations are underway for a spacewalk this evening by 2 Russian cosmonauts to begin the process of moving a heat-dissipating radiator from the Rosviet module of the International Space Station to the Naoka module, the new multi-purpose laboratory module that is adjacent to Rosviet on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. This spacewalk was to have been conducted back on November 25th, but as Prokopiev and Petelin were in the final stages of their pre-spacewalk preparations 3 weeks ago, there was a problem with the water cooling loops in both of their suits. That resulted in a scrubbing of the spacewalk and a postponement of the spacewalk. The 2 cosmonauts changed out the cooling pumps in both of their spacesuits, their Russian Orlan suits, and they are ready to go this evening with 2 healthy suits, ready to support what should be about a 6-hour, 37-minute spacewalk, in which their colleague inside the Russian segment, cosmonaut Anna Kikina, will be operating the Russian from a Russian work station, the European robotic arm that is already grappled to a radiator, the radiator carried up on the Rosviet module, along with an experiment airlock on Rosviet that was launched on the STS-132 mission of the Space Shuttle Atlantis 11.5 years ago, back in May of 2011. This is Mission Control Houston. As spacewalk preparations have been ongoing over the past hour or so, Russian flight controllers and the flight controllers here at Mission Control in Houston have been noticing a stream of particles coming out of the Soyuz MS-22 vehicle that is attached to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. We do not know what the source of this stream of particles is at this point. There is discussions that are ongoing. First, to make sure that the safety of the 2 spacewalkers is not compromised in any way, and then to determine what impact, if any, this might have on the integrity of that Soyuz vehicle. They are in the process of depressurizing the airlock down to vacuum in what they believe will be the start of their spacewalk tonight to support the movement of a heat-dissipating radiator from the Rosviet module. This is Mission Control Houston, and to illustrate what we have just been discussing, this is the Soyuz MS-22 vehicle that is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. And this is the issue that's under discussion right now here in Mission Control and on the loops with the Russian shift flight director and other Russian specialists as to what may be causing this stream of particles that appears to be coming from the area of the instrumentation and propulsion module of the Soyuz MS-22.
Moscow, that's for step 6.4. I am not seeing any video. And we copy. You do not need to put step 7 in work as of yet. Copy. And Anna, could we please switch to space to ground 1? Copy.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a close-up view of the area of the Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft that began streaming particles of what could be coolant fluid that began about 45 minutes or so ago. This all happening while Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin were in the airlock, the Poisk module airlock on the opposite side. This Soyuz, which brought Frank Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin to the station back in September, is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. The Soyuz, again, is attached to the Earth-facing side, to the Rosviet module, where it docked back in September. And about 45 minutes ago, we began to see a stream of particles coming from the area of the instrumentation and propulsion module of this vehicle as Prokopyev and Petelin had completed the donning of their Orlan spacesuits in preparation for the spacewalk that they are preparing to conduct outside of the Poisk airlock to support the movement of a heat-dissipating radiator from the Rosviet module over to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module. The actual movement of the radiator would be supported from inside the station by cosmonaut Anna Kikina, operating the European robotic arm, while Prokopyev and Petelin disconnect a number of cables, monitor the relocation of that radiator, and then hook up mechanical and hydraulic connections for the radiator to Naoka. Now, what impact this apparent leak or stream of particles from the Soyuz MS-22 might have on tonight's spacewalk, not yet known. We are in discussions with the Russians as we speak to determine whether or not there will be any impact to the spacewalk itself.
МКС Суб Москвы, канале СГ-2 для Сергея, Дмитрия, Анны.
Moscow station of space to ground. 2 for Sergei, Dmitry. And go ahead. Guys, external solder loop for the Soyuz is leaking. We are currently analyzing the situation and looking into the telemetry, so you will have to stand by and wait for our final decision regarding your EVA. We copy. The vehicle is not leaking itself. The ISS is fine. We are checking the telemetry. I'll let you know as soon as we know more from the telemetry. Copy, thank you. So just make sure you're comfortable, guys, because you are going to be sitting still for the next half hour. Yeah, just stand by for our commands and guidance and instructions. Will do.
This is Mission Control Houston. You just heard a conversation between Russian flight controllers in Korolyov at the Russian Mission Control Center and the two cosmonauts, Sergei Prokopyev, the Expedition 68 commander, and Dmitry Petelin, who are suited up in their Orlan suits inside the airlock in the Poisk module of the International Space Station. They were informed that the Russian flight control team is monitoring the leak that you're looking at right now that appears to be coming from the Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft that is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The two cosmonauts were told to sit tight and await further word while the Russian technicians and engineers in Korolyov assess the current situation with the Soyuz spacecraft. This is the spacecraft that brought Prokopiev, Petelin, and Frank Rubio to the station back in September. The other Russian cosmonaut who is on board the station, Anna Kikina, launched on the SpaceX Crew Dragon, along with Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, and Koichi Wakata. Two spacewalkers are standing by, waiting for further word from Russian managers as to whether or not they will proceed with this evening's spacewalk. Two hours ago, it was first noted that there was a warning associated with low pressure in one of the two external Soyuz cooling loops, and along with that, a visible stream of particles that emanated from the aft of the Soyuz vehicle near the instrumentation and propulsion module, indicative of a leak. The Russian managers are evaluating what that might be and what may have caused such a leak.
Okay, so the decision has been made to cancel EVA, so we'll have to do the repress.
You just heard a moment ago the word officially passed on by Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow to Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Petelin that tonight's spacewalk has been canceled because of an observed leak of what is believed to be a cooling substance from the Soyuz MS-22 that is docked to the Rossviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The leak was first observed about 2 hours ago, associated with a warning associated with low pressure in one of the two external Soyuz cooling loops. We noticed a visible stream of flakes coming from the aft of the Soyuz near the instrumentation and propulsion module that was indicative of a leak. The experts, the specialists in Moscow, are evaluating the nature of the fluid that appears to be leaking from the Soyuz and what impact that might have to the integrity of the Soyuz MS-22 that was launched back in September with Prokopiev, Petelin, and NASA astronaut Frank Rubio. In the meantime, Prokopiev and Petelin are back inside the space station. The airlock has been repressurized at no time were any of the crew members of Expedition 68 in any danger, and you can see that the leak continues from the area of the instrumentation and propulsion module on the Soyuz MS-22. This is Mission Control Houston. You're continuing to take a look at particles leaking from the Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft docked to the Rossviet module of the International Space Station. This leak was first observed about 2 hours and 45 minutes ago, around 6:45 p.m. Central Time, at the time at which Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin were preparing to begin a spacewalk to move outside of the Poisk airlock of the station, a spacewalk designed to move a radiator from the Rosviet module to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module. This leak or stream of particles from the area of the instrumentation and propulsion module was associated with a drop in pressure in the cooling loop of the Soyuz MS-22. It is not known what the source of the leak is. Russian specialists are in the process of evaluating data, taking a careful look at video that is being sent to them from here in Mission Control, while we stand by and wait for further word. In the meantime, Prokopyev and Petelin safely back inside the International Space Station. They were never in any danger in the airlock, in the Poisk airlock of the station, preparing for their spacewalk. They're now out of their Orlan spacesuits, awaiting further word on what the next course of action will be. This is the Soyuz vehicle that was launched back in September to carry Prokopyev, the Soyuz commander, and now Expedition 68 commander, Petelin, and NASA's Frank Rubio to the station, launching from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
Station space to ground 1 for Dmitry. Go ahead on space to ground 2.
Антон, ну 421, вот я открыл, да, я так понимаю.
I opened 421. And so I'm supposed to do SUD activation and the pressure sensors test. Those
This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, it has been just about 3 hours now since we first observed what you're seeing on the screen, that being a leak of particles, presumably from a cooling loop on the Soyuz MS-22 at the Rassvet module of the International Space Station, that forced a cancellation of tonight's spacewalk by Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin. The leak of the fluid that you're seeing in the form of snowflake-like particles, apparently coming from a cooling loop on the Soyuz. Not clear at this point from the Russian specialists as to what impact, if any, this might have on the performance or the integrity of the Soyuz spacecraft. The two spacewalkers for tonight, Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin, who along with Frank Rubio of NASA launched on this Soyuz vehicle back in September from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Prokopyev and Petelin were suited up inside the Poisk airlock on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. And they were depressurizing the Poisk airlock down to vacuum to begin a spacewalk to move a radiator along with the assistance of Anna Kikina, the European robotic arm operator inside the Russian segment of the station. That radiator was to have moved from the Rassvet module to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module. The Russian managers met at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow and determined that tonight's spacewalk would have to be canceled. That word was radioed up to the two spacewalkers and the rest of the crew on board the station. And with the cancellation of the spacewalk, the Poisk airlock was repressurized. Prokopyev and Petelin climbed out of their Orlan spacesuits. They're back inside the station. All of the Expedition 68 crew members were never in any danger during the course of tonight's activities, but we continue to watch this leak as it propagates itself on the Soyuz MS-22. The source of the leak not known at this point, or the cause. This is Mission Control Houston. You're continuing to watch live video from the Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft that began leaking from a coolant loop, it is believed, about 3 hours ago, at the time at which Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin were in the process of preparing for a spacewalk this evening that ultimately was canceled. It is believed that this leak is coming from the area of the instrumentation and propulsion module at the aft end of the Soyuz. The exact location of this leak not yet specifically pinpointed, and discussions are ongoing as to what the future course of action might be with this vehicle and what approach the Russian specialists will take in analyzing the data and making a determination in concert with International Space Station management as to what may be the end result of this leak that you're seeing, that again began about 3 hours ago, about 6:45 p.m. Central Time, as Prokopyev and Petelin were inside the airlock of the Poisk module of the International Space Station preparing for a spacewalk that eventually was canceled. They are back inside the station. The Expedition 68 crew is in great shape, at no time in any danger, while further discussions are ongoing with specialists and engineers as to the next course of action.
Inaudible.
МКС Суд Москвы в канале СГ-2 для Дмитрия по проведению
Station
системы
Moscow.
расхода.
Space to ground 2 for Dmitry. And post EVA reconfig.
Отвечаю вас, готово.
Go ahead on space to ground
Дим, я
2.
понимаю, ты еще занимаешься, да, приведением в исход?
I can see you're still in the process of
В принципе, все, мне осталось
doing
только
step
молоко
decimal 21.
Значит, понятно. У меня
Well, I just have
информация по
to
приведению. Там нужно электрон включить будет.
put the pressure gauges
Включить, перестыковать опять
back in
сигнализацию
place.
на ПСС и проверить связь
Yes.
с следующим сигналом.
And also you need to switch your
Так, хорошо, тогда сигнализация.
alarm system from EVA support panel to PSS caution and warning panel and inaudible.
1,500 feet, and we contact 7111 and access 297. Москвы. МКС Г2, сигнализация ПСС перестыкована. За 406.
Принято, Дим, спасибо. Сейчас мы команду подготовим.
Moscow Station.
Буквально минуту-две подожди, пожалуйста, подбить звук.
Да, я знаю.
We switched the caution and warning system back to PSS.
Москва МКС Г2, да, прошла сигнализация. Вызов на связь отбил.
Да, принято, Дим.
We had the audible signal and I acknowledged it. Copy and thank you.
Да, готов, записываю.
And
поток СМ и ВМЛМ.
now reactivate the Patok in SM and MLM for RODF.
Потоки, да, лучше дать.
Поток СМ.
Yes, поток in the service module.
7.2.1. Шаг 1.
And this is per step 1 of RODF
Поток МЛМ.
for atmosphere
Пункт 5.2.1.
step 7.2.1.
Да, принято.
Фиксировал.
I copied.
Включить воздух в третий режим.
And reactivate воздух
БВК
in
2,
mode
3.
4. BVK 2 and 3 valves.
Цикл СО 20 минут.
And atmosphere purification system cycle 20 minutes. Vacuum pump system cycle 1 minute.
Воздуха 100%.
Airflow rate 100%.
Нажать клавишу «Работа».
Так, еще раз. Цикл СО 20 дальше.
And what did you say after
Вакуумного насоса.
atmosphere
1 минута.
purification system? Vacuum pump cycle
Расход воздуха
1 minute, airflow rate
100%.
100%.
И потом нажать клавишу «Работа».
And then press the operation button. Работа.
Принято.
Copy.
Бортовая СОКС СМ. Пункт 3.2.
And this is per atmosphere system SOGS SM step 3.2.
Зафиксировал.
Дальше проверить исходное состояние электронным ЛМ
And
и
check
выполнить набор
electron
БЖ.
in MLM
Бортовая
and repress the liquid unit BG, and this is the SOGS RODF
3.2.
step 3.2, paragraph 3.2, step 2.
И по надуву пункт 3.6.
And for repress, this is paragraph 3.6.
Да, принято.
Copy and work.
И ну вот на первый взгляд пока все.
And this is it for now, I think.
Выполняем.
Copy, will do.
This is Mission Control Houston. If you're just joining us, expecting to see a spacewalk by Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Petelin, that was canceled just about an hour and 15 minutes ago because of this leak of coolant from a cooling loop on the Soyuz MS-22 that you're seeing here in this view. This leak was first observed about 6:45 p.m. Central Time this evening. while Prokopiev and Petelin were inside the airlock in the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the station, preparing. They were suited up in their Orlan suits, ready to go outside to begin a spacewalk that had originally been postponed 3 weeks ago because of cooling pump issues on both of their Orlan spacesuits. Those pumps were replaced, the suits were checked out, and everything was in readiness for the spacewalk tonight that would have seen Prokopiev and Petelin work in concert with cosmonaut Anna Kikina of Roscosmos, who was to have operated the European robotic arm to move a radiator from the Rassvet module to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module for its installation on Naoka. With the stream of coolant particles coming out of the aft area of the Soyuz MS-22, Russian managers met and determined that they would have to cancel the spacewalk tonight while they began further discussions on the next course of action, determining the integrity of the Soyuz MS-22. This is the spacecraft that brought Prokopiev, Petelin, and NASA astronaut Frank Rubio to the International Space Station back last September for a 6-month stay on the orbital outpost. It docked to the Rassvet module after a 2-orbit rendezvous last September. And Prokopiev, now the Expedition 68 commander, and Petelin and Rubio have been working along with the other members of the Expedition 68 crew. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a view of the extended European robotic arm, which is affixed to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module, extended in the direction of the Soyuz MS-22 that is docked to the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. That European robotic arm was to have moved a radiator from Rassvet to Naoka for its installation during tonight's spacewalk by Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Petelin, but that spacewalk was canceled a few hours ago following the detection of a coolant leak from the Soyuz MS-22 that began about 6:45 p.m. Central Time this evening. Russian managers and flight controllers are working right now to assess data that they've been observing and determine the next course of action in concert with NASA managers and International Space Station managers in the wake of this coolant leak that propagated itself about 6:45 p.m. Central Time this evening. This is Mission Control Houston. Again, this view of the extended European robotic arm. Anna Kikina is at the controls of the arm from a workstation inside the Russian segment of the station, and the arm at the moment, which was originally to have moved a radiator from Rassvet to Naoka for tonight's spacewalk by Prokopiev and Petelin, now becomes a surveyor. It is being used to do a inspection of the Soyuz MS-22 to try to gather more data for Russian managers as to what may have caused the leak that caused the propagation of snowflake-like particles from the aft section of the Soyuz that began about 6:45 p.m. this evening. So that's what you're seeing, the arm in motion at the moment towards its extended position of about 37 feet in length, conducting a survey of the Soyuz MS-22. This is Mission Control Houston. Just to recap where we're at here this evening, you're looking at a view of the extended European robotic arm, having been extended by cosmonaut Anna Kikina from a workstation inside the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The arm, which is attached to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module, was to have been used this evening during a spacewalk by Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Petelin to transfer a radiator stowed on the outside of the Rassvet module to the multipurpose laboratory module, the Naoka. Prokopiev and Petelin were suited up in their Orlan suits in the Poisk module airlock. They had actually begun to depressurize the airlock in preparation for a spacewalk that had been planned for about 6 hours and 37 minutes. While that activity was going on, we first detected 4 hours ago a sudden stream of particles looking like a snow shower that was identified as coming from a cooling loop in the Soyuz MS-22, the crew vehicle, the sole Soyuz ferry ship that is attached to the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. The cause of that leak of coolant, not known at this point. The effect, not yet known at this point. Russian managers gathered at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Kolyov on the outskirts of Moscow, and quickly determined that they would have to cancel the spacewalk for this evening while they assess their next course of action. Prokopiev and Petelin repressurized the Poisk airlock, climbed out of their Orlan suits, and got back inside the station. At no time were any of the members of the Expedition 68 crew in any danger, but discussions are ongoing with Russian managers in Korolyov, along with International Space Station and NASA officials, as to what the next course of action will be regarding that Soyuz MS-22 vehicle. Just to recap, we had planned to conduct a spacewalk this evening by Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Petelin. The intent of the spacewalk was to have moved a radiator from the Rassvet module to the Naoka multipurpose laboratory module. That spacewalk was to have begun about 2.5 hours ago, but at 6:45 p.m. Central Time this evening, it was detected that a fairly significant leak of coolant was coming from the aft end near the instrumentation and propulsion module of the Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft that you see on the right side of your screen, which is docked to the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The cause of that coolant leak unknown, and the effect at this point unknown, as Russian managers continue to look over the data and consult with both NASA managers and engineers and International Space Station partner individuals about the next course of action. No decisions have been made regarding the integrity of the Soyuz MS-22 or what the next course of action will be. We're going to wrap up our coverage for this evening, but we can assure you that we will keep you updated with information as it becomes available, as soon as it becomes available, and as warranted throughout the course of the night and into the morning tomorrow, when more information might be available.